Hey guys, tonight we wander into a world where sand and river conspire to make a civilization that refuses to die. You're standing barefoot on damp soil, the kind that drinks sunlight and Nile water in equal measure. Frogs croak, papyrus sways, and in the distance a heron stalks dinner with priest-like concentration. You can feel the air itself hum with something ancient, something that hasn't decided whether it's magic or just really good irrigation. You probably wouldn't survive here, honestly, between crocodiles, floods, and the blinding heat. It's not exactly Airbnb friendly, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Nile isn't just a river, it's the script that writes Egypt's destiny. It breathes in yearly, rising from the highlands far to the south, and exhales its lifeblood across the desert. You can almost see it from above, a long green ribbon twisting through endless beige, holding life in its patient grasp. Without it, there's nothing but heat and silence. With it, there's barley, flax, fish, and the miracle of not starving. You crouch beside one of the earliest farmers around 5000 BCE. He's grinding grain on a stone slab, half listening to frogs, half praying the river floods just enough, but not too much. He's got no pharaoh yet, no pyramids, not even hieroglyphs. Just trust in the Nile and a community that treats it like a moody god who can ruin you on a whim. Historians still argue whether these early settlers were locals or migrants from further south, maybe Nubia, maybe the Sahara before it dried out. Either way, they learned to plant in the silt and measure the flood's rise with nothing more than intuition and gossip. When the river failed, people didn't blame climate, they blamed cosmic disorder. When it overflowed too much, same deal. The Nile wasn't a resource, it was a personality. You can smell clay as women shape pots for storing beer, grain, and oil. Children chase goats, men weave nets for catfish that gleam silver in the sunrise. It's quiet, but not peaceful, everything depends on water. The earliest huts line the floodplain, roofs of reeds glinting gold. You might even catch someone etching marks in mud tablets, early attempts to keep count of debts, cows, and who owes beer. Here's a quirky tidbit. One of the oldest preserved sandals found near this period had its owner's footprint still pressed in. Same size as yours, maybe. A reminder that before pharaohs, Egypt was built one dusty step at a time. Over generations, little farming villages start comparing notes. One floods earlier, another later, so they argue about canals, about sharing water, about who gets the best gods. Out of these quarrels grows leadership. Someone must decide when to dig and when to pray. By around 4000 BCE, two distinct worlds appear, Upper Egypt in the south, stretched along the narrow valley, Lower Egypt up north, where the Nile fans into the delta. They're like two siblings constantly fighting over the same riverbed. You float along the current between them, passing painted pottery and small shrines to falcon gods and snake spirits. Everyone wants control of the flood, because control of the flood means control of life itself. The earliest kings, if we can call them that, start appearing. Their names fade, their tombs crumble, but you can sense ambition thick as the mud. One mainstream fact, Narmer, the first unifier around 3100 BCE, is often credited with merging Upper and Lower Egypt. His ceremonial palette shows him wearing both crowns, the tall white one for the south and the red flat one for the north, smacking some poor rival with divine enthusiasm. Historians still argue whether Narmer was truly the first or just the most photogenic, but either way, his triumph marks Egypt's first heartbeat as a single kingdom. Imagine the ceremony. Drums echo through the valley, priests chant hymns older than memory, and a young ruler steps forward claiming to be more than human. His crown gleams in the sun, symbols of both lands fused atop his head. The people cheer because finally, maybe, there's someone who can talk sense into the river gods, and just like that, Egypt is born, not from war or conquest, but from the endless rhythm of flood and drought. The Nile becomes law, religion, and currency all at once. The river calendar defines months, its rise and fall decide taxes. When it floods, the people celebrate. When it doesn't, they panic and sacrifice a goat or two. As twilight paints the fields purple, you can feel the first pulse of something vast awakening, a civilization balanced perfectly between chaos and order, desert and oasis, life and death. In the distance, the reed flutes fade, and firelight flickers across faces painted with river mud. No pyramids yet. No dynasties, but the seeds are already planted in fertile silt. The Nile hums softly, ancient as breath, whispering that this is only the beginning. You wake to the sound of birds gossiping above the river, their calls bouncing off mud brick huts. The air smells of wet clay and smoke, and your toes press into cool silt that's half farm, half miracle. Egypt's first farmers are now more than just survivors, they're inventors. They've learned that taming a river is like negotiating with a moody god. You can't control it, but you can pretend to. So they dig canals, raise embankments, and mark the flood levels with carved notches. You watch as those notches turn into symbols, and those symbols, somehow, into words. The first hieroglyphs emerge like dragonflies, shimmering on temple walls and potsherds. Each one feels alive, a bird that means a sound. An eye that means protection, a ripple that means water. You run your fingers over them, still wet from pigment. It's hard to tell where art ends and writing begins. Historians still argue whether Egyptian writing came from Mesopotamian influence or was an independent stroke of genius, but either way, it quickly becomes Egypt's heartbeat. Bureaucrats will use it to count grain, priests to whisper prayers, and lovers to scratch promises on amulets. You drift through time again, villages swelling into towns, towns into proto-cities. Temples rise like punctuation marks across the floodplain. Cows and crocodiles both get promoted to divine status. You can almost hear the laughter as gods multiply faster than mosquitoes. There's Horus, the falcon, Hathor, the cow goddess of joy, Sobek, the crocodile who keeps people from swimming too freely. Egyptians adore the strange idea that their gods live in everything: feathers, reeds, cats, even dung beetles rolling little suns across the ground. A priest nearby hums as he grinds malachite for eye paint. It protects against evil, he insists. Maybe also sun glare, but the marketing is strong. He dips his brush and paints a perfect line along a statue's gaze. That same green powder will one day become Cleopatra's eyeliner. See, fashion truly never dies. You cross a threshold where power begins to crystallize. By around 3100 BCE, Egypt isn't just unified, it's bureaucratically obsessed. Officials measure, record, and tax everything from barley yields to donkey ownership. The king isn't just a ruler, he's a living god, the physical bridge between heaven and earth. You can sense how that belief seeps into everything: architecture, rituals, even gossip. Someone sneezes, and another murmurs, "May the Pharaoh's Ka bless you." Quirky tidbit time: one of the earliest royal graves, belonging to King Scorpion II, yes, really, contains jars of imported wine from Canaan, complete with ancient labels. So, apparently, even 5,000 years ago, Egyptians were already judging each other's drink choices. You wander through the city of Abydos, sacred to Osiris, god of the afterlife. Incense burns, and people line up to offer bread, flowers, and sometimes a lock of hair. The air is thick with devotion and body odor. Behind the temple, you catch a glimpse of a scribe under a fig tree, his reed pen scratching across a strip of papyrus. He's young, tired, and smug about it, an ancient intern translating grain counts into elegant loops. He knows writing is power. The farmer sweating outside can't read, but he can turn words into taxes and taxes into monuments. As you move closer to the palace, guards in linen kilts salute. Inside, walls are painted with boats, lotus blossoms, and gods embracing kings. The colors hum with life, reds from iron, blues from lapis, greens from ground malachite. Every scene is a prayer disguised as decoration. The king stands larger than everyone else, of course, smiling the fixed smile of someone who's never carried a basket of mud in his life. But here's the secret: Egypt isn't just run by gods and kings. It's powered by thousands of hands: farmers, potters, fishermen, bakers, scribes. The hum of labor fills the land like background music. Bread bakes on flat stones. Nets pull silver from the Nile. Somewhere a child carves a clay cat, perhaps the first prototype of a souvenir your future self might one day buy at a museum gift shop. Historians still argue whether the early Egyptian state grew peacefully from trade networks or through conquest. The evidence suggests a bit of both: alliances sealed by marriages, feasts, and maybe the occasional whoops, "Now your city belongs to me." What's certain is that power begins to centralize around one idea: divine order. They call it Ma'at, truth, balance, harmony. Without Ma'at, the river wouldn't rise, the sun wouldn't shine, and your crops would wither faster than your patience during tax season. You can almost feel Ma'at in the air, the rhythm of planting, the symmetry of temples, the calm repetition of rituals meant to keep chaos at bay. To Egyptians, chaos isn't just disorder, it's cosmic death. The opposite of Ma'at has a name: Isfet, the dark swirl of confusion that lurks at the edge of every horizon. The Nile's dependable flood becomes a symbol of the universe functioning correctly. Every harvest is proof that the gods are still in business. The king, or rather the pharaoh, becomes the human embodiment of that cosmic balance. When he speaks, it's divine will. When he taxes, it's divine math. When he sneezes, probably still divine, though unrecorded. Every temple, every carving, every court decree revolves around him maintaining the world's balance. You, standing there in the golden dust, can sense how intoxicating that must have been. As night falls over the early dynasties, torches flicker against painted walls. The pharaoh dines in splendor, workers share bowls of lentil stew. Somewhere, a priest consults the stars, plotting next year's flood. Egypt is beginning to believe that eternity can be managed, with calendars, symbols, and a little divine intimidation. The river sighs softly in the dark, carrying whispers of the future: pyramids, empires, and gods yet unborn. For now, though, it's just you, the stars, and the Nile breathing quietly in the dark, an unbroken promise between land and water, life and myth. The morning sun climbs slow and golden over the desert ridge, and you feel the air shimmer with promise. Egypt has entered its first true golden age, the Old Kingdom, roughly 2680 to 2180 BCE, and everything smells of ambition and limestone dust. The Nile glitters like a polished blade, and you're standing at the edge of Memphis, the brand new capital where pharaohs command from palaces that sparkle with imported cedar. The word of the king is now law, religion, and weather forecast combined. This is the age when people stop merely surviving and start trying to outlast death itself. You follow a line of workers marching across the plateau, dragging limestone blocks with ropes and chants. They're building something no one has ever seen before, a staircase to the heavens made of stone. The step pyramid of Djoser rises in Saqqara, designed by Imhotep, the world's first recorded architect, doctor, and overachiever. He's basically the Leonardo da Vinci of 2600 BCE, only with better posture. You tilt your head back and squint at the 6 stacked terraces of the step pyramid, each one perfectly aligned to the cardinal points. The blocks glow under the sun, the air alive with hammering and laughter. The workers sing rhythmic songs to keep the pace. Contrary to the movie cliches, they're not slaves, they're paid laborers, often farmers working during flood season when fields are underwater. They get food, beer, and maybe mild back pain as compensation. Beer, by the way, is the national beverage, often brewed thick enough to chew. You'd love it, unless you like your drinks without sand in them, historians still argue whether pyramid labor was entirely voluntary or a form of national duty with some heavy propaganda attached. The debate continues, but one thing is clear: the sense of shared purpose is real. Everyone here believes they're building eternity, both for their king and for themselves. The step pyramid becomes the prototype for everything Egypt will ever dream of. You watch as each generation raises the stakes. Djoser's successors build smooth-sided pyramids, testing geometry against gravity. Sneferu, the ambitious king with an equally ambitious building problem, tries 3 designs before getting it right: the bent pyramid, which halfway through construction changes angle, as if the builders collectively panicked; the red pyramid, the first true smooth-sided one, and a massive carbon footprint of limestone quarries. By the time his son Khufu takes the throne, you can almost hear the nation hold its breath. Khufu orders something so massive that even the gods probably rolled their eyes. The Great Pyramid of Giza begins. You stand among thousands of workers chanting, sweating, and joking as they haul 2-ton blocks up ramps. The sun bakes your skin, the dust sticks to your teeth. Somewhere, an overseer yells, someone trips, and everyone laughs. You can taste eternity in the air, a mainstream fact. The Great Pyramid originally stood about 146 meters tall, taller than any structure humans built for nearly 4,000 years. Each stone fits so precisely that a blade of grass can barely slide between them. And the alignment? Perfectly squared to the cardinal directions, off by less than a 20th of a degree. Historians still argue whether they used stars, shadows, or alien interns. But the precision remains breathtaking, and here's a fun tidbit: ancient graffiti inside the pyramid includes casual worker team names like the Drunkards of Menkaure or the Friends of Khufu. Turns out even eternity had construction crews with inside jokes. You climb the plateau as Khafre, Khufu's son, builds his own pyramid nearby, guarded by a monumental lion with a human face, the Great Sphinx. Its nose is still intact for now, its smile serene and faintly smug. Legend says it represents royal power fused with the sun god, but you suspect it's also ancient Egypt's way of saying, "Beat that, Mesopotamia." Everywhere, life buzzes around the pharaoh's divine aura. Priests organize rituals at dawn, artisans carve scenes of daily life onto tomb walls, fishing, farming, dancing, all frozen mid-motion so the deceased can enjoy them forever. The afterlife is now fully bureaucratized. Every spirit must file the correct spiritual paperwork to reach paradise. You watch a priest recite the pyramid texts, the world's oldest known religious writings, full of spells to help the pharaoh ascend among the stars. But beneath all this perfection, small cracks begin to form. Farmers grumble about grain taxes. Nobles accumulate land and power. The priesthood grows richer than the royal treasury. Egypt's cosmic balance, its ma'at, is wobbling like an overloaded barge. You wander through fields where workers mutter prayers for steady floods. One year, the river rises too little, the next, too much. Without predictable water, harvests fail, and suddenly all that stone grandeur feels heavy, almost absurd. You linger near the pyramid base as dusk paints the desert gold. The workers pack up, their laughter quieter now. The pharaoh still claims to be divine, but even gods need bread and beer. Somewhere far upriver, a local governor refuses to send taxes to the capital. It's a tiny act, unnoticed at first, but it's the first whisper of rebellion. Historians still argue over what caused the old kingdom's collapse: drought, economic strain, political fragmentation, or just the exhaustion of holding perfection too long. Whatever the cause, the Great Pyramids stand silent witnesses. Their stones keep their secrets as centuries slip by. You lie back on the warm sand, staring up at the pyramid silhouetted against the violet sky. The wind hums through their corridors like the breath of the dead. Egypt has proven it can build eternity, but eternity, it turns out, is expensive. The stars above seem to flicker in agreement, reflected faintly in the dark surface of the Nile. The wind carries dust and unease across the Nile Valley. The air feels heavy, the songs quieter. The old kingdom has ended, not with a bang, but a long, weary sigh. The Nile runs low, crops wilt, and people whisper that the gods are angry. Egypt, once a land of order and stone, is slipping into chaos. This is the first intermediate period, roughly 2180 to 2050 BCE, a time when no one truly knows who rules. The pharaohs are gone, replaced by local nomarchs who stop sending grain or respect to a distant capital. Egypt becomes a patchwork of small kingdoms with their own gods, taxes, and rivalries. You pass through villages where famine is real. The Nile has failed to flood, farmers dig into dry earth. And temples grow silent. Even priests look uncertain, they can't command the river anymore. Scholars still debate the cause, climate, revolt, or a failing system, but the result is the same: power fractures, estates crumble, tombs are plundered, and eternity goes on clearance. Memphis lies in ruins, its incense replaced by ash. Statues of pharaohs stand chipped and hollow-eyed, watching the desert. Yet even in chaos, people adapt. In the south, Thebes rises, small but ambitious. Local rulers there invoke Ma'at again, hoping balance can be rebuilt with enough prayers and stone. Life continues despite hardship. Farmers plant, potters shape clay, families leave bread for the dead. Archaeologists have even found letters to deceased relatives asking for help with daily problems. A reminder that even in crisis, people reach for the familiar. In Asiat, local governors build modest tombs, less about glory, more about securing a stable afterlife. Inscriptions shift from royal proclamations to personal pleas. Art changes too, becoming livelier, more human. Egypt fragments, but its creativity endures. Meanwhile, rival dynasties rise: Heracleopolis in the north, Thebes in the south. Both claim divine right, one leans on power, the other on moral ground. Slowly, the south gains the upper hand. Mentuhotep II leads his forces north, banners bright against the sun. Town after town yields, tired of uncertainty. Around 2050 BCE, Mentuhotep reunites Egypt. The Nile floods again, as if in approval. Songs return, temples reopen, scribes ready their ink. A new chapter begins, not as proud as the old kingdom, but wiser. As twilight falls, the river carries silt, fish, and forgiveness. The stars reflect like offerings on the water. Egypt, scarred but breathing, remembers itself again. The night air over Thebes smells of incense and mud brick, freshly rebuilt, freshly hopeful. Egypt has survived famine and rebellion. Under Mentuhotep II and his successors, the Middle Kingdom, 2050 to 1650 BCE, hums back to life. The Nile floods again, fields turn green, and the streets buzz with bakers, potters, and merchants. Egyptians call this a rebirth. It's less about divine destiny and more about smart management. The new kings favor grain counts over gold crowns. Bureaucracy returns with quiet power, officials measure canals, redraw borders, and keep the country balanced. At Deir el-Bahri, Mentuhotep's mortuary temple rises from the cliffs, calm, elegant, confident. Thebes is now the kingdom's heart. Amenemhat I and Senusret I rule with sharp minds and cautious hands. Amenemhat even co-reigns with his son to ensure a smooth succession. Paperwork also reaches the afterlife, coffin texts appear, guiding souls through the underworld with spells, directions, and ritual terms and conditions. Eternity is now available to everyone, not just pharaohs. Workshops bustle with artisans crafting shabtis, tiny figurines meant to serve the dead. Literature flourishes, too. You overhear the tale of the shipwrecked sailor, a castaway's story that feels timeless. Trade returns in force, caravans bring copper, cedar, and spices, ships glide down the Nile, carrying wealth and distant scents. Engineering thrives. New canals channel water to Fayum, turning desert to farmland. The kings favor practicality but can't resist grandeur. Senusret III centralizes power with military precision. His statues, stern and weary, reflect a ruler who takes stability personally. Evenings in Thebes glow with lamplight. Harps play, dancers whirl, and wisdom texts spread advice like ancient self-help guides. Be kind, for no one knows what tomorrow brings. Religion softens. Osiris becomes the model king, just, merciful, resurrected. Festivals fill the streets with song and wine. The gods feel closer now, less like distant powers and more like neighbors, but beneath prosperity lies fragility. One failed flood, one greedy noble, and it could all unravel. The kings know this, leaving behind cautionary texts: build no monument of pride, for time will laugh at it. As the sun sets over Deir el-Bahri, the cliffs glow bronze. The Nile gleams, steady and silent. Egypt feels wiser now, disciplined, introspective, aware of its past mistakes. The chaos of the old kingdom lingers as a warning, and in the quiet, Egypt whispers to itself, "We have rebuilt. Let's see how long it lasts." By the time the Middle Kingdom gives way to the Second Intermediate Period, Egypt has once again learned that eternity is a group project with missing pages. It begins quietly, Nile floods falter, governors grow bold, priests wealthy, scribes political. Into this fragile balance step the Hyksos. They don't arrive as conquering armies but as persistent newcomers, traders, herders, mercenaries, gradually settling in the delta. They marry locally, build cities, adopt Egyptian customs. At first, nothing seems unusual. Until you notice the horses. Egypt, horseless for centuries, suddenly faces chariots slicing through battlefields like thunder. Around 1650 BCE, the Hyksos established their base at Avaris. They don't topple Egypt overnight, they fill a power vacuum. The north falls under their rule, Thebes controls the south, and Egypt fractures once again. Yet the Hyksos aren't barbarians. They respect Egyptian gods, use Egyptian titles, and bring bronze tools, composite bows, and chariots. Even Egypt's bureaucracy quietly takes notes, but to the Thebans, foreign pharaohs are unthinkable. Grumbling in temple halls grows louder. Seqenenretau leads the first resistance but dies violently, his mummy later revealing the wounds of war. His son Kamose carries the fight, and finally Ahmose drives the Hyksos out around 1550 BCE, a long, bitter war of sieges and resolve. When you walk through Ahmose's reunited Egypt, the air hums with relief and triumph. Thebes rises as liberator, temples are restored, taxes reformed, border forts rebuilt. But this time, Egypt doesn't retreat, it looks outward. The Hyksos have taught them that isolation breeds weakness. Conquest now feels like protection. The stage is set for the new kingdom, an age of empire, wealth, and gods in gold masks. Pause here and look at the Nile. 2,000 years of floods and dynasties, famine and war, and the river still flows, indifferent. Rulers may rise and fall, but life continues. Farmers plant, artisans paint, priests chant. The names of gods shift, but the rhythm remains the same: life, death, renewal. One evening on the banks of Thebes, torchlight dances on water as a priest sings to Ammonius, now ascending as supreme god. Flutes echo through the night. Egypt seems to hold its breath, ready to exhale into empire. The Hyksos are gone, but their legacy endures: new weapons, new strategies, new purpose. Egypt has learned that devotion needs vigilance. As dawn gilds the cliffs of Deir el-Bahri, the next act looms, brighter, louder, and more magnificent. The age of warriors and gods is about to begin. You wake to sunlight spilling over a reborn Egypt. The Hyksos are gone, their fortresses crumbled, their chariots claimed. In their place rises a nation no longer content to simply endure, it wants to dazzle. The new kingdom begins around 1550 BCE, and Egypt becomes an empire. The Nile doesn't just flood, it performs. At the heart of this new age is Thebes, gleaming like the gods' jewelry box. Temples stretch skyward, obelisks catch the sun, and Ammonius reigns supreme. Pharaohs of the 18th dynasty, Ahmose, Amenhotep I, Thutmose I, and beyond, rule like living gods. Even the stone statues seem aware of their own glory. Egypt's borders surge outward, into Nubia, Canaan, and Syria. Under Thutmose III, the Napoleon of Egypt, armies sweep across deserts and rivers, turning Egypt into a superpower. The Hyksos once brought chariots, now Egypt perfects them. Conquest brings wealth. Perfumes, cedar, exotic animals, and Nubian gold pour into cities. Granaries fill, temples expand, markets buzz. But amid the splendor, you sense how fragile it all is. The empire runs on faith, in gods, in Pharaoh, in the system. One sour note, and the lyre could snap. Enter Hatshepsut. When her husband dies young, she becomes regent, then Pharaoh, fake beard and all. Her reign prospers, trade flourishes, expeditions to Punt return with incense, trees, even giraffes. Yet her legacy is later chiseled away. Her name scratched off walls, proof that even divine rulers must fight time. Monument making reaches new heights. Karnak and Luxor swell to monumental scale, their reliefs endless hymns to eternity. Every carved stroke is propaganda in stone. We endure, but beyond royal splendor, daily life beats steadily. In Deir el Medina, tomb builders scrawl graffiti, my neighbor borrowed my chisel again. We are tired. Art, music, and poetry flourish, love poems flutter like papyrus notes, my heart flutters like a goose. Beneath all the gold, Egypt still dreams, loves, and gossips. Then comes Amenhotep III, ruler of the Golden Age. Peace reigns, the colossi of Memnon keep silent watch. Yet even perfection cracks. His son Amenhotep IV will soon rewrite Egypt's gods themselves. You linger in the Theban dusk. Lotus mingles with dust. Sunset bathes temple walls in red, and the Nile flows on, calm and knowing. Egypt stands rich and invincible, but history always stirs when certainty settles. It begins, as revolutions often do, with one person deciding everyone else is wrong. In Thebes, Amenhotep IV, soon to be Akhenaten, tells Egypt's priests their thousands of gods are unnecessary. Imagine showing up to the temple of Ammonius and hearing, we're downsizing. One god now. Aten. The sun. You're all fired. Around 1350 BCE, at the height of Egypt's power, Akhenaten doesn't just tweak tradition, he rewrites it. Aten, the sun disk, is the sole god, Akhenaten, his chosen voice on earth. No Ammonius, no Osiris, no afterlife bureaucracy, just one glowing circle in the sky, the priesthood, stripped of power and wealth, seethes. Temples lose funding, statues are smashed, names erased. So Akhenaten starts fresh, building a new capital, Akhetaten, horizon of the sun disk, Amarna. Entire neighborhoods, temples, palaces rise from the desert in record time. You follow him there. The air feels strange, bright, new, a little cultish. Art abandons rigid poses for fluid, intimate scenes, royal children playing, parents kissing, elongated faces basking in Aten's rays. Akhenaten statues appear androgynous, Nefertiti stands radiant beside him, perfection carved in stone. For ordinary Egyptians, though, the shift is bewildering. Their gods had animal heads and clear roles. Now they must worship a faceless disk. Unease simmers beneath the sunlight. Akhenaten writes hymns to Aten that feel almost modern. Hymns to warmth, light, and nature. But while he preaches, Egypt's borders fray. Vassals beg for aid, our city's on fire, send troops. And receive silence. Theology takes priority over defense. Was Akhenaten a visionary or a zealot? You wander his sunlit courtyards and feel both awe and unease. The light is total, leaving no shadows. beautiful, but relentless. Meanwhile, life goes on. Bakers bake, children play, cats reign. Scribes groan over new writing reforms. Artists rush to meet divine design changes. Then it ends. After 17 years, Akhenaten dies. The Aten cult collapses overnight. Tutankhaten, soon Tutankhamen, restores the old gods. Amarna is abandoned to sand and wind. Akhenaten's name is erased, his memory cursed, the criminal of Amarna. Centuries later, the ruins whisper fragments of his dream, sun disks above broken doorways, Nefertiti's serene smile. Belief, once radiant, now ghostly. Yet the idea lingers, that one divine light might bind all things. As the Egyptian dawn flares over the desert, the horizon still belongs to the sun disk, for a few golden minutes. And standing in that quiet, you can't help but admit, it's breathtaking. The sunlit city of Akhetaten fades like a half-remembered dream. Egypt exhales, returns to its many gods, and tries to forget the pharaoh who once rewrote heaven. In the calm after the storm rises a boy whose name will echo for millennia, not for what he did, but for what he left behind, Tutankhamen. He ascends the throne around 1332 BCE, still a teenager, inheriting a country weary from Akhenaten's revolution. Temples are quiet, priests broke, people spiritually homesick. Guided by Vizier I and General Horemheb, the young king restores the old order, Aten out, Ammonius in. Thebes gleams once more with incense and offerings. Tut's reign is a collective sigh of relief. Royal decrees speak of setting the gods in their places and making the land as it was. The people love him, young, pious, safely traditional. His wife Ankhesenamen, Akhenaten's daughter, stands beside him, graceful and clever, but his body betrays fragility. Modern science shows malaria, clubfoot, and congenital issues from inbreeding. Ceremonial chariot rides are more for display than speed. Still, he stands as the golden boy of restored faith. In the Valley of the Kings, artisans prepare his tomb, small and hastily carved. No one expects him to die at 19. Whether illness, accident, or conspiracy, his death stuns the court. Priests perform the opening of the mouth ritual, resins, myrrh, amulets, and layer after layer of linen prepare him for eternity. When the golden mask is placed over his face, the boy becomes a god. The tomb is sealed, buried, forgotten. 3,000 years pass. In 1922, in the Valley of the Kings, Howard Carter peers through a small hole. "Can you see anything?" His patron asks. "Yes, wonderful things," he whispers. Inside are over 5,000 treasures, thrones, chariots, sandals, even food for eternity. The golden mask stuns the world. Tutmania spreads through newspapers, museums, and fashion. Tales of a curse add drama, though science later blames bacteria. In the flickering light of that tomb, the objects feel personal. A half-played board game, sandals with enemies painted on the soles, a dagger forged from a meteorite. Tutankhamen is not just a king, he's a time capsule of a civilization at its peak, where the sacred and the ordinary intertwine seamlessly. As you step back into the sun, you think of his brief life. No wars, no great reforms, yet his name eclipses Pharaoh's far greater. Perhaps that's Egypt's quiet truth: immortality isn't power, it's memory. The wind sweeps softly through the Valley of Kings. The boy who restored the gods sleeps on, surrounded by wonderful things, while the sun, Aten, Ammonius, Ra, still shines on his resting place, indifferent to names. When Tutankhamun's brief light fades, Egypt craves something grand, loud enough to drown out memory and death. The gods are restored, the empire hums again, and the throne finds its way to a name carved deep into history, Ramses. There will be 11 Ramseses, but Ramses II, the Great, sets the standard. Born around 1303 BCE, he takes the throne young and rules for 66 years. While other pharaohs flicker by, Ramses endures like granite. From the start, he acts like a man bargaining with eternity. Colossal statues of his calm, confident face rise across Egypt. His name is chiseled on temples, pylons, and any flat surface in reach. Abu Simbel, his masterpiece in Nubia, is carved from living rock. Four-seated colossi catching the dawn light like gods reborn. Inside, walls show Ramses worshipping, conquering, being worshipped in turn, but he's more than a builder. Early in his reign he marches north against the Hittites. The Battle of Kadesh, circa 1274 BCE, becomes his defining story. Egypt and Hittite chariots clash in chaos. Whether victory or draw depends on who's telling it, but Ramses ensures his version, where he turns the tide single-handedly, is carved on every wall. Whatever the truth, the two powers later sign the world's first known peace treaty. Ramses builds a new capital, Pyramus, a thriving city of palaces, stables, and bustling markets. Under him, Egypt reaches its greatest territorial extent. Maintained as much through diplomacy as through force. He marries a Hittite princess, sealing alliances as easily as walls. His long reign brings stability and grandeur, soaring temples, heavy taxes, and a swelling cult of the living god. Priests of Ammonius grow rich again, yet to ordinary people Ramses is simply eternal. Jokes spread that if the Nile ever dries up, he'll order it to flood again. Age comes even to gods. In old age, Ramses weakens but refuses to fade. His mummy shows worn joints and a fierce jaw, proof of a lion who lived long enough to ache. When he dies in his 90s, Egypt mourns as though the sun itself has dimmed. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings is splendid, but his temples carry his legacy. Abu Simbel, the Ramesseum, Luxor, stone sermons repeating the same message, I was here, and I mattered. Future pharaohs call themselves sons of Ramses. Centuries later, the Greeks assume he must have been divine. In Abu Simbel's inner chamber, sunlight cuts through darkness twice a year, illuminating Ramses and the gods beside him. For a breath, it feels as though the stone itself inhales. Outside, the Nile glitters, indifferent, eternal. Ramses has become more than a man. He is a symbol of Egypt's oldest dream, not just to live forever, but to make sure the world sees it. After Ramses the Great, Egypt seems to exhale, a long, slow sigh that drifts across the centuries. His sons and grandsons inherit an empire vast but weary, glittering but stretched thin. The great monuments still stand, the temples still ring with hymns, yet the pulse beneath them weakens. The Bronze Age world itself begins to crumble, as if every civilization along the Mediterranean suddenly forgets how to hold a hammer. You drift through this slow unraveling like a ghost among ruins still warm from the sun. Egypt's wealth drains into endless wars and grand building projects that no longer have the purpose they once did. The priests of Ammonius grow stronger than ever, managing land and wealth like a second government. In Thebes, their processions fill the streets. In the Delta, the royal court grows distant, bureaucratic, distracted. By the time Ramses XI, the last of his name, takes the throne, even the Nile's cycles seem uncertain. The people whisper of famine, of tomb robbers desecrating the Valley of the Kings, of gods who look the other way. The 20th dynasty flickers out, and with it ends the great age of empire, but Egypt does not fall so much as it changes its costume. The new kingdom gives way to the third intermediate period, a polite phrase for 2 centuries of fragmentation and foreign influence. You can imagine the map splitting like old papyrus, Libyan chiefs in the west, priests ruling Thebes in the south, and rival dynasties sprouting like weeds along the delta. Every leader still calls himself pharaoh, but the word begins to sound ceremonial, hollow, as if it remembers more power than it possesses, and yet, even in decline, Egypt refuses to disappear quietly. The temples still blaze with offerings, the rituals still turn with the seasons, and the afterlife remains a crowded, bustling place in everyone's imagination. In a strange way, the Egyptians seem more obsessed than ever with memory. When your mortal world cracks, you cling harder to eternity, foreign powers begin to circle. The Nubians, once Egypt's students, return as teachers. From the south rises a kingdom with its own line of pharaohs, the Kushite rulers of Napata, who marched north to restore the old order. The 25th dynasty, sometimes called the Black Pharaohs, sees Egypt reborn under Nubian kings who honor the old gods with reverence that almost feels nostalgic. They rebuild temples, recarve sphinxes, and look back to the age of Ramses as a model of purity. For a moment, it works. The Nile flows steady, the shrines hum again with life. You might think Egypt has turned back the clock. But the world beyond its borders has changed beyond recognition. To the east, the Assyrians roar, a warlike people from Mesopotamia whose armies crush kingdoms like pottery under iron boots. When they come, even the mighty Nubian pharaohs cannot hold them. The Assyrians storm Egypt in 671 BCE, leaving behind chaos and puppet kings. The Sate dynasty rises next, an Egyptian comeback of sorts. Pharaohs like Psamtik and Necho rebuild the cities, reopen trade routes, and flirt with Greek mercenaries who bring new words, new gods, and new curiosities. The capital shifts to Sais in the delta, close to the Mediterranean breeze, a sign that Egypt's gaze now turns outward again. For a few generations, the land feels stable, wise, quietly dignified. The hieroglyphs still flow. The priests still chant, but something has shifted. Egypt is no longer the center of the world, it's becoming a crossroads. The Persians come next, led by Cambyses, who takes the throne of Egypt around 525 BCE and declares himself pharaoh. To many Egyptians, it feels almost natural. After all, kings come and go, but Ma'at, the divine order, remains. As long as the Nile rises and the temples burn incense, the gods can tolerate a foreigner wearing the crown. Still, each new conqueror erodes something intangible. The language begins to simplify, old crafts vanish, the monumental stonework gives way to more hurried styles. Egypt's soul endures, but it feels distant now, like a song played underwater, and then, one day, sails appear on the horizon. Not Assyrian, not Persian, Greek. Alexander the Great strides into Egypt in 332 BCE, and for the first time in centuries, the people greet a conqueror with relief. He proclaims himself the son of Ammonius, pays respects to the temples, and founds a new city on the coast, Alexandria. There, marble and limestone mingle, and the old gods learn to speak Greek. For all its ancientness, Egypt adapts again. The Ptolemies, Greek successors of Alexander, rule for 300 years. Blending Hellenic ambition with Egyptian ritual. The first Ptolemy dons the double crown, and his descendants do the same, including the last and most famous of them all, Cleopatra VII, but that, you realize, is another kind of story, one of intrigue, politics, and doomed love whispered by the Nile under Roman stars. The age of pyramids and pharaohs has already faded into legend. The gods of Egypt, once vivid and intimate, drift into myth. They'll survive in the ink of Greek philosophers, in the spells of Roman magicians, in the dreams of scholars centuries later. Still, if you walk by the Nile at night and listen carefully, you might hear the echo of a prayer that never really stopped, a farmer asking happy for a good flood. A mother leaving bread for Hathor, a scribe tracing the name of Ammonius by candlelight. Egypt doesn't die, it simply withdraws behind its own mythology, content to be eternal in memory if not in empire. You step softly into the age when the pharaohs no longer rule, but their shadows still cling to every stone. The Greeks have come to stay. Alexandria glitters, a city of marble and light, where the Mediterranean's breath smells of olive oil, ink, and ambition. Its harbor buzzes with sailors speaking a dozen languages, and its great lighthouse, the Pharaohs, towers above it all like a second sun. Here, the old and new Egypt coexist in a strange, shimmering balance. You walk through the streets, past Greek statues of Apollo that share courtyards with statues of Horus, past philosophers debating under colonnades while priests of Isis slipped through side doors into their incense-thick temples. Even the gods seem to adapt. Isis becomes adored across the Mediterranean as a universal mother, and Serapis, an invented blend of Osiris and Zeus, sits serenely on new altars, smiling that diplomatic smile that only ancient deities can manage when forced to merge. In the Library of Alexandria, knowledge becomes the new form of divinity. The world's wisdom gathers here, scrolls from Babylon, poems from Greece, medical treatises from India. Scholars pace among papyrus shelves, arguing about stars, numbers, and the nature of the soul. Somewhere, a scribe carefully copies the Book of the Dead, preserving spells that had already been ancient before Socrates was born. You can almost hear the soft rasp of reed pens. The murmur of intellectual worship, and yet, even this brilliance carries a faint melancholy. Egypt has traded its divine monarchy for a cosmopolitan experiment. The Ptolemies, Greek rulers in pharaonic crowns, marry their siblings in Egyptian fashion, build temples to both Ra and Dionysus, and pretend that nothing has really changed. But everything has. Hieroglyphs still appear on temple walls, but fewer people can read them. The sacred language begins to fossilize, like an old spell repeated by rote long after its meaning has faded. Historians still argue whether the Ptolemies truly loved Egypt or simply exploited its mystique. Ptolemy I styled himself a faithful steward of the gods, while his descendants grew ever more entangled in luxury, politics, and palace intrigue. Behind the polished facade, power shifts constantly, priests against nobles, Greek settlers against native Egyptians, and siblings scheming against each other for the throne. You can feel the tension thick in the palace air, sweet as lotus perfume and just as fleeting. Then comes Cleopatra. Not the caricature of popular myth, but the real queen, fluent in Egyptian when few of her ancestors bothered, educated in philosophy and mathematics, and fiercely proud of her heritage. When you picture her stepping onto the balcony of the palace at Alexandria, the sea breeze tugging at her linen dress, you can almost sense the ghosts of Hatshepsut and Nefertiti standing behind her, amused that a woman must again rescue Egypt's image. Cleopatra courts Julius Caesar, then Mark Antony, weaving alliances like silk threads to keep her country alive between two hungry empires. It's not just romance, it's diplomacy under the stars. You might roll your eyes at the dramatic deaths that follow, but in truth, the end was written long before the ASP or the Roman legions. When Cleopatra's breath stops, so too does the heartbeat of an independent Egypt. The Roman eagle spreads its wings. And the land of the Nile becomes a province. Roman rule brings new gods, new roads, and a new kind of order. Egypt's temples still function, but now they serve emperors instead of pharaohs. Priests carve the faces of Augustus and Tiberius beside those of Ra and Horus, blending divine right with imperial bureaucracy. Tourists from Rome marvel at the pyramids like you might at a theme park, already ancient, already mysterious. The monuments become backdrops to their own legend. But the Romans can't resist Egypt's magic. They carry its symbols back to Europe, the Ankh, the Sphinx, the obelisk, and reinterpret them as curiosities, trophies of timelessness. Even emperors fall under its spell. Caligula orders statues of Egyptian gods for his palace, Hadrian builds a mock Nile in his villa. Isis temples spread as far as London, where her priests performed the same ancient rites under a cold grey sky. Still, deep in the Nile Valley, ordinary Egyptians continue to live by rhythms older than any empire. Farmers sing to Hapi when the flood returns. Women offer bread to Batet for healthy children. Scribes record dreams of the afterlife in demotic script, a simplified, flowing descendant of the hieroglyphs. You can sense their quiet resilience, their refusal to let go of a worldview that made the entire universe feel personal. Eventually, time turns again. The Roman Empire wanes, and a new faith begins to flicker across the desert sands, Christianity. Egypt becomes one of its earliest homes. Monks retreat into the desert, building monasteries where once temples had stood. The old gods fade, but they don't entirely die, they're absorbed, transformed, remembered in new ways. Isis becomes a faint echo in the Virgin Mary's tenderness. Horus, the divine child, lingers in paintings of the infant Jesus. By the time hieroglyphs fall silent for good, carved by the last known priest in the Temple of Philae around 394 CE, you realize that Egypt has quietly outlived every conqueror. It has changed languages, religions, rulers, but never its soul. The Nile still floods. The people still bury their dead with care. The desert still whispers the same dry lullaby it did 5,000 years ago. So much has vanished, yes, but Egypt endures, not in conquest, but in memory, in symbol, in the way it haunts every civilization that dares to dream of eternity. Even now, as the moonlight ripples across the river, you can almost imagine the faint outline of a bark gliding through the stars, Ra still sailing across the heavens, keeping his endless watch. The centuries roll on, and Egypt slips deeper into the current of empire after empire, as if the Nile itself keeps carrying new masters downstream. After the Romans come the Byzantines, inheriting a tired land still beautiful, still stubborn. The temples of the gods are shuttered, their priests long silent, replaced by bishops and monasteries that dot the desert like lonely ships. You walk through crumbling columns now carved with crosses, their hieroglyphs fading beneath centuries of dust. The language shifts again, from Greek to Coptic, the final evolution of Egypt's tongue. It still hums with the rhythm of the old land, though written now in Greek letters. The people pray to a single God but still speak with the cadence of those who once prayed to many. There's a strange tenderness in that continuity. Old habits, after all, die slower than dynasties. Then, in 641 CE, the Arab conquest sweeps in like the desert wind, swift, decisive, irreversible. The soldiers of Amr ibn al-As march into Alexandria, and a new era dawns, Islamic Egypt. Cairo rises soon after, founded as Al-Qahira, the victorious. You can almost feel the ground tremble beneath the hammers building mosques where pharaonic stones are reused, recarved, reborn. The call to prayer now echoes where once the priests of Ra chanted hymns to the sun. Historians still argue whether this shift was a rupture or a rebirth. On one hand, Egypt's ancient religion finally recedes into myth. Its gods tucked away in stone and story. On the other, the land thrives again. Under Islamic rule, Egypt becomes a beacon of scholarship, trade, and culture. The Nile Delta hums with new life. Farmers irrigate the fields as they always have, but now their taxes feed caliphs in Damascus, then Baghdad. The rhythm remains: water, wheat, and worship. Cairo blossoms into one of the medieval world's jewels. You drift through its markets, where spices fill the air, cinnamon, cardamom, and the faint sweetness of dates. Scholars debate astronomy beneath minarets. Paper replaces papyrus, ink flows freely. The ancient Egyptian love for recording knowledge, it seems, never really died, it just changed script. The city's mosques, like the Mosque of Ibn Tuluan and later Al-Azhar, become architectural heirs to temples long gone, vast courtyards of symmetry and light, echoing devotion upward into the sky. Meanwhile, the countryside remains timeless. You walk along the Nile and realize the farmers still measure their seasons the same way their ancestors did 3,000 years before. They still read the sky for omens, still bless the water, still tell stories of hidden tombs and curses when the moon is high. The gods may have changed names, but their patterns linger in the bones of the land. The Fatimids rule, then the Ayyubids, then the Mamluks, a dynasty of enslaved warriors who seize the throne and, improbably, make Egypt great again. Under Sultan Baybars and his successors, Cairo becomes the beating heart of the Islamic world. Minarets multiply like reeds along the riverbank. The Mamluks build schools, hospitals, fountains. They commission Quran manuscripts so elaborate they shimmer like ancient temple carvings. Egypt's artisans, forever meticulous, carry on the same perfectionism that once shaped obelisks and sarcophagi. And yet, empires never last. The Ottomans arrive in 1517, claiming Egypt for their sultans in faraway Istanbul. The Mamluks bow, at least officially, but in truth they still rule behind the scenes. Egypt becomes both a province and a prize, its riches flowing north, its spirit as independent as ever. The Nile keeps rising, the people keep adapting. You can sense how deeply Egypt understands survival. It doesn't fight time, it flows with it, the way the river curves around rocks. When Napoleon's cannons boom in 1798, startling the minarets of Cairo, Egypt simply absorbs the shock. French scientists follow in his wake, measuring, sketching, and cataloging everything ancient they can find. It's during this strange occupation that the Rosetta Stone emerges, a simple decree carved in 3 scripts, hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. That stone becomes a key, though no one knows it yet. When it's finally deciphered decades later by Champollion, it opens the floodgates of history. After nearly 2,000 years of silence, the ancient voices of Egypt speak again. You can almost imagine the spirits of scribes chuckling softly from the afterlife, amused that it took the world so long to remember what they'd carved so patiently. The 19th century brings more upheaval. Muhammad Ali Pasha rises, modernizing Egypt with factories, schools, and a standing army. Steamships glide down the Nile. The Suez Canal cuts open the land in 1869, letting the world's ships sail straight through Africa's waste. Egypt is once again at the center of things, though now, it's global trade, not divine order, that defines its destiny. But modernization comes with chains. Debt pulls Egypt under foreign control, and by the late 1800s, British officers occupy Cairo. The land of pharaohs becomes a colony once more. Trains rattle through the desert, telegraphs hum across the delta. The old gods, long silent, must be smirking somewhere. For all the empires that have come and gone, humans still can't resist claiming Egypt as their own, and through it all, the ordinary people remain. Fishermen mending nets at the river's edge, children running through fields of sugarcane, women balancing clay jars on their heads as they did 5,000 years ago. The modern and the ancient exist side by side, like 2 mirrors facing each other. Reflecting infinity, Egypt has endured every conqueror not by defiance, but by patience. It waits. It adapts. It remembers. And even now, as the call to prayer drifts across Cairo at dusk, you can feel the weight of eternity in the sound, the same devotion, different language, same heartbeat. As the 20th century dawns, Egypt awakens to a new rhythm, one pulsing not with pharaohs or sultans, but with the restless beat of nationalism. You wander Cairo's streets, where trams rattle over tracks laid a generation ago, vendors shout over the din of automobiles, and posters plaster walls, urging Egyptians to reclaim their destiny. The British occupation still lingers, but now the conversation has shifted. Egypt is no longer just a prize, it's a nation in waiting. King Fuad I sits uneasily on the throne, a figurehead tethered to colonial oversight. The real power sometimes seems to drift like sand through fingers. Political parties rise, demonstrations swell, and intellectuals debate the future of an ancient land that has seen everything. You watch students gather at cafes along the Nile, their voices mingling with the scent of coffee, tobacco, and the river's eternal breath. They quote poets, recite history, and dream of independence. It's a subtle revolution, quieter than chariots or cannon fire, but no less potent. By 1922, Egypt officially gains nominal independence from Britain, and Fuad crowns himself king with a flourish that feels almost ceremonial, yet for the people, the gesture is electric. Newspapers buzz. Streets overflow. The monarchy's pageantry recalls the old pharaohs, processions, gold-trimmed uniforms, the careful choreography of power. And just as in ancient times, Egypt's identity is as much symbolic as political. The country is asserting its narrative, rewriting its story after centuries of foreign control, throughout these years, archaeology becomes a national obsession. Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, reignites global fascination with the land of pyramids and mummies. You stroll among the crowds outside the Valley of the Kings, feeling the same awe ancient Egyptians must have felt when first crafting monuments to eternity. Egyptians themselves, students, scholars, and villagers, begin to reclaim their heritage, studying hieroglyphs, documenting sites, and asserting pride in a civilization that had long been a curiosity for outsiders. The mid-20th century brings more turbulence. World War II, revolutions, and the eventual 1952 Free Officers' coup topple the monarchy. Gamal Abdel Nasser rises as president, and the Suez Canal, Egypt's ancient artery of trade and strategy, becomes the stage for a showdown with Britain, France, and Israel in 1956. You imagine the Nile again, unperturbed, flowing through conflict, holding centuries of memory beneath its calm surface. The river has witnessed pharaohs, Ptolemies, Romans, Arabs, Ottomans, and colonial powers. It will endure yet another challenge. The Aswan High Dam, completed in 1970, reshapes the landscape, creating Lake Nasser and controlling the great river's floods. It's a technological marvel and a symbol, Egypt mastering the very lifeblood that has defined it for millennia. Yet you can't help but think of the tombs, temples, and villages submerged by this ambitious project, reminders that even progress carries sacrifice. Modern Egypt hums with vitality, bustling markets, neon signs, honking cars, and the ever-present aroma of koshari and falafel. Cairo's skyline stretches upward, a mosaic of minarets, mosques, and modern high-rises. Still, beneath the urban sprawl, the past whispers in subtle ways, the rhythmic flow of the Nile, the traces of limestone temples along desert edges, the faint alignment of streets echoing ancient grids. History lingers in the water, the sand, the air, and even as Egyptians navigate global currents, the stories of their ancestors remain alive: pyramids, mummies, kings, queens, and gods. Tourists marvel, children play among ruins, scholars debate in universities, and the spirit of ingenuity and resilience endures. The land has been conquered, reshaped, modernized, yet it never truly bends. It adapts, preserving its essence like papyrus pressed against the walls of time. You pause along the Nile at sunset, watching the orange light spill over water and minarets. The air smells faintly of lotus and smoke, and you realize that this is Egypt's true magic. No matter who rules, how empires shift, or how civilizations rise and fall, the land and its people carry continuity. The river sings the same song it always has, reminding anyone who listens that history is not just a timeline, it's an enduring presence, flowing as endlessly as the Nile itself. By now, you're moving almost instinctively along Egypt's timeline, stepping lightly across thousands of years as though the Nile itself were a conveyor belt beneath your feet. From pharaohs to kings, Greeks to Romans, Arabs to Ottomans, colonial powers, and modern states, each era layers atop the last, like sediment in a riverbed. The story feels endless, yet intimately connected, as if every triumph and collapse flows directly into the next. Modern Cairo thrums beneath your feet, yet echoes of the past are everywhere. The pyramids of Giza rise in the west, timeless and silent, their limestone surfaces catching the sun in a warm, dusty glow. Tourists trudge along the base of Khufu's massive monument, snapping photos, laughing, unaware of the generations of workers, architects, and scribes who shaped it millennia ago. You feel a strange vertigo at the continuity. Here, humans tried to reach the heavens in stone, and today, they still strain to understand. You wander through Luxor's temple complexes, the columns adorned with hieroglyphs and painted scenes still vibrant after 3 millennia. A gentle wind brushes over the open courtyards, carrying faint whispers of chants and footsteps of priests long gone. The statues of Amenhotep, Ramses, and others gaze serenely at you, as if acknowledging that time has passed. Empires have shifted, yet their presence endures. Even the Nile, endlessly patient, hums its ageless rhythm, indifferent to kings, conquerors, or tourists, Egypt's story is not only one of grandeur, it is also of survival. Centuries of conquest could not erase its identity. The culture, the art, the devotion to life and death, and the eternal fascination with the afterlife, these persist in modern customs, in the stories people tell, in the rhythms of daily life. Farmers still measure the seasons with the river's rise, artisans still craft using techniques passed down through generations, children still play amid ruins that seem ancient even to the oldest living memory. In some ways, Egypt is like a layered dream. You notice the Greek columns that echo Egyptian motifs, the Roman mosaics resting beside Coptic churches, the minarets of Cairo standing alongside temples and tombs. History folds upon itself, not erased but accumulated. Each age borrows from the last, and yet the land never loses its voice. It speaks of resilience, adaptation, and the remarkable human desire to remember, as the sun sets, casting a golden haze over the desert and city alike. You pause and let the river's song fill the space around you. You feel the weight of thousands of years, of dynasties, revolutions, and rebirths, and yet, paradoxically, it is calming. Egypt endures because it has always known that life is cyclical, floods and famines, kings and conquerors, temples rising and crumbling, each leaving an imprint, each contributing to the whole. You inhale deeply, the scent of the Nile mingling with the faint aroma of incense from a nearby mosque. You realize that this is what Egypt teaches, that survival is not just about power, conquest, or innovation, but about continuity, memory, and adaptation. It is about carrying forward what matters, preserving knowledge and culture, and embracing change without losing oneself. And in that thought, you feel almost like you, too, are part of its story, momentary, fleeting, yet connected to something enduring. The light softens, the wind carries the gentle whispers of history, and you let yourself sink into the quiet understanding that this land has witnessed everything, and will continue to do so long after we are gone. You walk slowly along the riverbank, letting the past fold gently into the present, knowing that Egypt's pulse still beats beneath the sand, the stones, and the eternal Nile. Now, let's take a deep breath together. You've traveled 5,000 years in a single evening, from the first settlements along the Nile to the bustling streets of modern Cairo, and your mind might be spinning with kings, queens, gods, and conquerors. Allow the pace to slow. Feel the warmth of the desert sun fading, replaced by the cool hush of evening. Imagine the Nile stretching endlessly before you, its waters reflecting the stars, carrying all of Egypt's stories gently downstream. The pyramids and temples no longer demand attention, their forms blur into quiet silhouettes. Hear the soft wind brushing over the dunes, carrying faint echoes of chants, footsteps, and laughter from civilizations long gone. Inhale the timeless rhythm of the river, the same rhythm that once guided farmers planting their crops, scribes copying sacred texts, and priests whispering prayers to gods whose names you may never fully know. You might picture the golden mask of Tutankhamun, the serene face of Nefertiti, the towering colossi of Ramses, and even Cleopatra's gaze, images layered upon one another, blending past and present in a lullaby of memory. Let them fade slowly, as if the desert itself is tucking them away, giving them peace. As your thoughts drift, imagine the subtle continuity of Egypt itself, the Nile rising and falling, the desert wind carrying stories, the people adapting, surviving, remembering. History is not a series of abrupt endings, but a gentle flow, like the river beside you. You are a quiet observer now, a witness to persistence, endurance, and transformation, cradled by a land that has seen millennia pass yet remains steady, patient, and eternal. Slowly close your eyes, feeling the weight of time ease from your shoulders. Egypt's pulse continues beneath the sand and stone, carrying all that has come before and all that will follow. Let the knowledge of its resilience soothe you, as you drift into your own river of dreams.